The spring of 1453, Constantinople, the heart of Eastern Rome, stood behind its centuries-old, unyielding walls, waiting for the impending storm. On the opposing side was a young ruler of only 21, possessing a genius far beyond his time, Sultan Mehmed II. In the early days of April, the Ottoman army deployed before the walls in the shape of a massive crescent. Tents were pitched, banners were raised, and the footsteps of thousands of soldiers shook the earth. This was no ordinary siege. The young sultan would either take this city or sacrifice everything for its sake. Beneath the shadow of the walls, the great countdown that would change the course of history had begun. The ground trembled, and the sky seemed to shatter piece by piece. Crafted through months of meticulous labor by the Hungarian engineer Orban, the colossal basilica cannons had been brought before the walls after weeks of an arduous journey from Edirne. When these massive beasts spoke, their roar could be heard miles away, casting a terrifying dread into the hearts of the Byzantine people. Each cannonball carved deep, bleeding wounds into the walls once deemed impregnable. Stones cracked, towers shuddered one by one. Armed with the power of technology and sheer resolve, Sultan Mehmed's army weakened Byzantium's ancient shield day by day, hour by hour. Yet, Byzantium had no intention of surrendering easily. The defensive line, led by Emperor Constantine, desperately mended the breaches in the walls with fierce determination. At sea, a horrific nightmare confronted the Ottoman navy, Greek fire. This mysterious and cursed flame, which refused to die even on water, reduced Ottoman ships to ash the moment it struck. The agonizing screams rising from the sea, the stench of burning timber, and the black smoke piercing the sky bore witness to the brutality of the siege. With their relentless resistance atop the walls and this lethal fire upon the waves, Byzantium tested the will and faith of the Ottoman army in the severest way. The siege had stalled, and failures at sea sowed seeds of unrest within the army. It was during that dark night that Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror mobilized the most audacious strategy in history. The mouth of the Golden Horn was sealed by a massive iron chain. Yes, but the Sultan's intellect would bridge the seas across the land. Trees felled from the forests were greased, and cradles were prepared. Driven by the raw might of thousands of soldiers and oxen, the Ottoman galleys glided over land through the dim glow of torches, sliding silently into the Golden Horn. Awakening to the first light of dawn, the Byzantine soldiers could not believe their eyes. The sea had changed course overnight, and the Ottoman fleet was now resting in the very heart of the Golden Horn. The echoes of the Mater marches resounding across the Golden Horn struck the Byzantine palace like an earthquake. That famous, insurmountable iron chain was now entirely useless. Ottoman ships paraded proudly in the calm waters of the Golden Horn, directly threatening the sea walls, the city's weakest defensive flank. Byzantium was forced to withdraw soldiers from the land walls to reinforce the naval defenses. This meant thin lines and divided strength. Mehmed's brilliant masterstroke had borne fruit, shifting the scales of the siege entirely in favor of the Ottomans. Victory was no longer a question of if, but when. The war raged not only above ground, but also with absolute ferocity meters below the earth. Expert Ottoman miners began digging tunnels to reach beneath the walls, completely undetected by the enemy. In these pitch-black, suffocating, and collapsing passageways, a grim struggle against death unfolded. The objective was to advance beneath the most critical bastions and ignite barrels of gunpowder. Upon realizing this underground peril, Byzantium dug counter-tunnels. Deep beneath the earth, by the flickering light of torches, fierce hand-to-hand combat erupted in the narrow confines. And when the powder ignited, the earth ruptured, tearing the walls from their very foundations. Days turned into weeks, and at last, the day of final assault arrived. On the morning of May 29th, before the break of dawn, the general assault commenced across all fronts. Thousands of Ottoman soldiers charged toward the walls with massive ladders. Despite the rain of arrows, boiling oil, and stones pouring from above, they did not hesitate for a single moment. Atop the ridges of the walls, the most violent, brutal hand-to-hand combat in history took place. The clashing of swords blended with agonizing cries. Both sides gave everything they possessed. This was the narrow line between the final sanctuary of an empire and the birth of a new one. Amidst this clash of life and death, a warrior emerged upon the walls of Topkapi, Ulubatli Hasan. In one hand, he bore a heavy shield, and in the other, the Ottoman banner, held dearer than life itself. Ignoring the storm of arrows, defying every wound that pierced his flesh, he climbed toward the highest point of the ramparts. While his comrades fell one by one beside him, he pressed on with unyielding faith until he reached the summit. Then, the monumental moment arrived. The banner unfurled, swaying in the wind. As Ulubatli fell to his knees from dozens of fatal wounds, the flag rising over the walls gave the army the ultimate resolve, the long-awaited herald of victory. Beholding the banner waving upon the walls, a wave of absolute panic struck the Byzantine forces. Cries of "The city has fallen" echoed through the streets. The defensive lines of Constantinople, the last fortress of Rome that had defied surrender for centuries, were now completely shattered. Soldiers retreated, gates were breached one after another. A deep, sorrowful, and dramatic silence began to blanket the city. A 1,000-year-old empire was dissolving into history at the base of its own proud walls. This moment was not merely the transition of a city, but the closing curtain of an entire civilization, an absolute surrender. And in the afternoon of that historic day, the young ruler entered the city upon his white horse. He was no longer just a sultan. He was Mehmed the Conqueror, the sovereign who closed an age and opened a new one. Amidst the timid gazes of the displaced populace, promising justice and clemency, he advanced toward Hagia Sophia. This monumental conquest tore away the dark curtains of the Middle Ages and threw wide open the gates of the modern era. Istanbul was now an Islamic capital, a metropolis of the world. And this grand finale was, in truth, the greatest new beginning for the history of mankind.